Welcome. My name is Daniel Stillwell, and I am the editor for the IFTA e-news letter. And sometimes we get a chance to interview some people about different topics, their work, or the different bodies that they're connected to for the international systemic family therapy community. And today we have Dr. John Lawless and Dr. William Hiebert to talk about the International Accreditation Commission for Systemic Therapy Education. And we'll probably call it the commission after this point, just because that's a bit of a mouthful. So hello, the two of you. Welcome. And I guess starting off, what is this commission? What is it about?
Thanks, Dan, for having us, Daniel. The commission is a way of setting some standards up for family therapy education across the globe. We here in the United States have a commission that oversees accredited programs, and we recognize that there was a need and a call from educators across the globe on setting some standards. So it's a way of setting some standards for the quality of education of family systemic therapy. Bill, you want to add some to that?
Historically, the International Family Therapy Association, or we'll say IFTA, was an interest group. It was never set up to be a standard setting group. But there appeared within IFTA a group of people who were known as the traveler trainers, who would, upon invitation, go into countries and conduct family therapy training upon invitation of the country. And it was not for money, so to speak, but in fact, they covered the expenses and that was it. But somewhere around the late 1990s, people began to agitate for some guidelines because countries around the world were moving towards licensure, and the countries would say, well, what are the standards for family therapy? Well, what does this look like? So that by the time we got to 1999, we had some guidelines for what a training program in systemic therapy should look like. But in fact, these were called, guidelines because IFTA was not in the standard setting business. And at a meeting in Holland in 2011, a group of people from other countries outside the North America came together and said, we need requirements, we need standards, not guidelines. And in fact, I remember one person saying, the word guidelines doesn't even exist in our language. And so we want standards. And Bill Nichols, who had written the guidelines, was very resistant to the idea of standards. But after this meeting, the decision of the board was to begin to move towards looking at a set of standards to guide programs developing training programs around the world. So that's how IFTA got involved in the idea of a commission. And it was in the Florida conference in 2013 that the board received the beginnings of a formal proposal to establish a semi-autonomous commission for accrediting training programs around the world.
So it sounds like the commission is birthed out of IFTA, but it's not technically a part of the organization.
It's not technically a part, and in fact, there is almost never a time that even one IFTA board member is sitting on the commission. There is no requirement that the IFTA board or its officers are to ever sit on the commission, and the commission has always taken a very hands-off connection between the two, believing that there should be no influence on the part of elected officers in seeing that a program is accredited. So at this point, the commission is self-electing. It elects its own members. And the only connection to IFTA is an annual report, which is, what shall we say, by the pleasure of the commission. And there is a small portion of income that goes to IFTA from the application process of a program.
Okay. What makes the commission different from other accrediting bodies? In the US, we have COAMPT that accredits MFT programs. What makes this different?
Well, I will answer from an administrative perspective. The majority of programs we accredit are outside North America. So the goal here was to provide a structure for non-American programs to have some kind of formal path towards accreditation, with the mindset that the commission has a two-tier system of accreditation, because they have always been aware that they're not only establishing standards, but their goal is to help programs that are working towards becoming more accredited in countries that have more limited resources, to try and work with them to become accredited. So it was never viewed as you're either in or out, but rather this is a process, a mutual process of growth. So I would say that's one of the big differences. We are stuck as a commission dealing with all kinds of contextual issues that relate to the countries that we're accrediting institutions they're in. And so we try to be very aware of what is the state of systemic therapy in that country. What kinds of resources do they have?
I think that's a really important point that Bill's making. You know, if you think about family therapy education across the globe, right, we're looking at many different countries that have access to different resources and support from the state that they're in. So how the United States supports family therapy education is very different than it might look in South Africa. May look different than it looks in Thailand. So one of the challenges that we have as a commission when we were starting the standards is, how do you set standards that allows people to meet a basic standard that people can agree upon, that this is a basic standard for family therapy education. So I think it's different because we had to take into account the resources that people may have. Money is one of those resources, but another resource is who's being trained, who are the family therapy educators. And that is also different here in the United States. You have in North America, really, you have a nice structure of where students can go and get family therapy education and then become professors and, you know, propagate the field in of itself. You have that also in Europe. You don't have something like that in other countries too. So we also had to take into account how do educators understand systemic therapy, and where were they trained? How were they trained? So those create certain challenges. And as we were putting together, we tried to address meet some of those challenges.
Well, it also sounds like you're not trying to homogenize the field. You're trying to understand that each context matters. Yes,
absolutely. I think that's a great point, Daniel. This is family therapy, systemic therapy looks different in different places. You know, there are some standards that are there, but even in the midst of those standards, there are differences. And how do you take into account those different standards, those contextual variables, so to speak, the cultural variables that may make the practice look a little bit different. So I think it's a good way of saying is that we didn't want, you know, a cookie cutter approach to the process and to the standards as they stand today.
Okay. What does it take to get accredited? If a organization or a program wanted to get accredited, is this like a particular degree, or is this a university level thing? How does that actually structurally work?
Well, the requirements are on our website, and they're divided into Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 would be programs that are less structured, are shorter in sequence, are designed for countries that are beginning to develop the field of systemic therapy, so that it lays out a curriculum of courses by hours that they need to have, as well as clinical practice and supervision. But it's significantly less intensive than Track 2. Track 2 looks like any kind of accreditation program here in the US. It would look like what is typical of many colleges running master degree programs in the United States. So that the Tier 1 is really designed for countries that are at the, shall we say, beginning of the journey developing the field, whereas tier 2 is for either institutions and or countries that have the resources to develop a more structured sort of graduate level program.
Is there a requirement for size or amount of people involved?
No,
Okay.
we have a variety of programs. Some of them are institution-based. Maybe I should be more clear and say educationally institution-based, that is university-based. We have some that are private institutions, training institutes. And in one case, we have one that is actually run by the country's Marriage and Family Therapy Association. So that there really are a variety of styles of training. And the issue for the commission is to try and find what is the native resources there. And one of the issues that confronts us as a commission is that there are very few people around the world who are trained in systemic supervision. Many of the programs outside of the US have a hard time finding systemic supervisors. So we have to sort of accept what's native to the country.
You know, and Daniel, one of the things you'll find if you were to see the application, it probably would look somewhat similar to other types of accreditation. What are the courses that you're teaching? Do those courses meet, for example, theoretical foundations? How do you talk about research? Are there ethics? What are the clinical skills? Who does the supervision, those type of things. So it's just like how you meet, you know, and those are consistent across tier 1 and tier 2, but the standards, it becomes a little bit more rigorous when you're meeting this tier 2 process. People who have longer experience, for example, they might have supervisors that were trained in the United States and then went back to their country, and they're, you know, COAMF or WMFT approved supervisors. So those are kind of one of the things that you'll see in the difference. But if you look at the application, it would be very similar. Who, you know, what are the courses, and in those courses, clinical skills and theoretical foundations. Who are the faculty are teaching it? Who does the supervision? So there, it's a way of kind of setting. It looks similar.
Okay. It sounds like that the people on the commission, maybe even the two of you, are open to people sending emails, asking questions to follow up about, you know, whether or not they qualify, which tier makes sense for them, that type of thing.
Absolutely. If you go to the IFTA/familytherapy.org website, you will see on the left-hand side MFT accreditation. And if you click on that, it will have accreditation standards, and it will also list the approved programs as well too. So if you click on the accreditation standards, there the application is there, and so you can. But certainly, if you have questions and you do that, and you want to reach out to Bill or I, we would welcome that.
Okay, and I will make sure to include a link in that in the e-newsletter, so that people can hopefully find it directly. I also wanted to address the inclusion of someone we recently lost, Dorothy Beckvar. She was one of the leaders, especially like you said, Bill, at the beginning, of how to move forward with all this. Can the two of you say a few words about her involvement and leadership?
Oh, when the commission was established, Lee Bowen was the president, the late Lee Bowen. And he then initially picked Dorothy Becvar to head the commission. He did so because of a number of factors. Among them were the fact that she spent a good deal of time teaching outside of the US, particularly in Asia. And so the sense of it was that whoever headed this commission had to have a sense of systemic therapy outside the US and what kinds of resources existed in a variety of countries. And that, by the way, always remains as part of the commission, because most of the commission members have taught outside the US. And so the goal here is to find people who have some kind of context outside of North America. The other issue with Dorothy, of course, she was a professor. She wrote a very well-known and well-used textbook in family therapy. Often people read it for the licensing exam in the States. And so she had the right combination of on-the-ground experience of working in foreign countries, teaching systemic therapy, but also had the background in the field so that she could integrate theory and practice to a real extent. And she had a passion for accrediting programs that were outside the US because she believed that we needed to spread the word, so to speak, about systemic therapy outside of North America and Europe.
Yeah, I think that just to echo all that, I think, you know, one of the things people who know Dorothy is that she's a great advocate for things that she believes in. She's a tireless worker, and she's well respected within the field of family therapy across the globe. And so it, you know, with all the things that Bill was discussing, it just made perfect sense to ask her to be part of this. And Lee made a wonderful choice in asking her and her accepting.
Yeah, she was the head for 5 years around that.
Yes, right.
Okay, yeah, so she definitely helped steward where we are now.
Yes.
She could read an application from a non-North America program and within very quick order look at what the issues were there, if there were any gaps in the program. And she usually almost always knew somebody in that country or knew several people who she could call to ask about the program. And so that was one of her gifts, was her connections around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Her gift too was also allowing the commission, that she could see that, but she didn't sway the commission. Her goal was to have people, you know, review the applications, come to the commission and have questions, and let's talk through this. And so she also was very good at facilitating these conversations in ways that, you know, sometimes there were things that when the standards were first set up, there may be something that we overlooked or didn't quite go into some depth. We had a standard there, and there was, but we didn't understand it, how it might affect a certain country, and we had a conversation about that. And you know, and rather than hold them accountable for something that was new, how do you help them move forward, but then change the standards so that the standards are flexible, but also informative. So she was very good at helping us. I mean, that's the process, right? The standards aren't static. They're living, and they need to be living based on kind of the types of programs that we're looking and the information that we're getting. So I think Dorothy's leadership helped us develop that type of stance, which I think is really beneficial for the development of family therapy education across the globe.
She was certainly one of the first people in her writing to teach me the importance of process over outcome. And so it sounds like she preached that in her leadership as well.
Absolutely, she did.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for coming on and talking about the International Accreditation Commission for Systemic Therapy Education. And I appreciate some words that you also shared about Dorothy.
Thank you for having us, Daniel.